Why should they give us this land back? It's already ours.
I don't think I'd let him have it without a fight. I think I'd maybe, if I saw that it was going to come, maybe burn the buildings and let him have nothing.
Clear the title for one group and pay a few pennies to the other group and sweep all this dark history under the rug and everything is fine. We don't buy that.
If the government took it away from them, it's the government's job to settle it. It shouldn't be no problem to us farmers out here, and we shouldn't have the rock held over our head because we bought the land in good faith.
It was your property. It was yours. It belonged to you. And it's like you lose it. It's like double robbery or something. You know, it's like a double injustice.
We are going to be very extensively involved in litigation, expensive litigation, litigation that very honestly probably is not going to benefit a whole lot of people.
I don't think they really understand how strongly the people feel about keeping the land. They don't want the money.
If you live on the land and are part of that land, you belong to the land, they are spiritual questions. They're from down here and here. They're not just intellectual questions. To be cut off from the land is to die.
Indians were cut off from their land on the White Earth Indian Reservation, and now non-Indians fear loss of their land on the reservation. Who does own the land? The question remains unanswered, because the illegal ways Indians lost the land now cloud the titles of current property holders. The lines are drawn between heirs to the original Indian land who want the land back and the governments, companies, and individuals who hold the land today. Despite 1986 legislation intended to clear clouded titles, the fight will continue in the courts and among the people of this northwestern Minnesota reservation for years to come. All sides agree that what happens on White Earth will set a precedent for other Indian claims involving millions of acres across the United States. The 1986 legislation is only the latest chapter in one of the most complex and dramatic cases of reservation land loss. Today, the White Earth Band of the Chippewa tribe holds only 6% of the original reservation. Federal government investigations determined that up to 200,000 of the reservation's 762,000 acres passed out of Indian hands illegally. These illegal transfers cloud or make uncertain the titles of current property holders. They can't sell or borrow against their property, compounding the problems they already face from the depressed rural economy. These non-Indians fear they could ultimately lose the land that for many years they thought they owned. On the face of it, the situation pits non-Indian property holders against Indian heirs to the land. Is it really that simple? The county, state, and federal governments hold a fourth of the reservation, with current claims against 30,000 acres. Even the tribe has land subject to claims by individual Indians. How does the situation affect the people directly connected to this clouded land? We will hear from the people themselves and look at how this complex tangle began over 100 years ago. The White Earth Reservation is a checkerboard of land holdings, private, mainly non-Indian owners, the tribe, state, county, and federal governments. Indians and non-Indians are neighbors, so the conflict between them is potentially volatile. Non-Indian resorts are next to tribal areas, and students from the entire reservation attend high schools together. Still, the towns on the western part of the reservation are mainly non-Indian, and the other White Earth communities are mainly Indian. Both Indian and non-Indian communities on White Earth are deeply rooted in the land. You can see it in their celebrations. Every year, the tribe hosts the June 14th powwow to celebrate the establishment of the White Earth Indian Reservation following the Treaty of 1867. It is a time when Indian people originally from White Earth, who are scattered all over the country, return to the reservation to be together with their families, share food, and reaffirm their roots as members of the White Earth Indian Nation. Their tribe is known as the Chippewa, or Ojibwe. They call themselves Anishinabe in their own language, meaning the first people. The weekend after the powwow, Emmanuel Lutheran Church in the close-knit farm community of Bijou celebrated its 50th anniversary. Bijou is the northernmost and smallest of the 5 mainly non-Indian towns established along the railroad in 1905. Some of the non-Indian families have farmed land here for 5 generations. People living in the area and former parishioners who had moved away came together for a church service and anniversary dinner. Like the church celebration, the powwow is a time for visiting and sharing food with family and friends. The communal spirit extends to outsiders too. Fernette Neeland and her daughter Celestia Weiss are members of the powwow committee that sponsored a feast for visitors. Many Anishinaabe believe land is supposed to be used communally, not owned individually. Getting land back for the tribe, which was lost illegally by individual Indians, has been the focus of a group called Anishinabe Akeeng, the People's Land. The annual gathering provided an opportunity for publicizing the land claims issue and informing other tribal members and the public of their stand on the issue.
Because under individual litigation, those are the invested property rights.
Other Indians, like Lesta Weiss, not previously involved in politics or members of any organized group, were forming opinions about the land claims issue and pending legislation.
All the people are well aware now that of what's going on, and they're coming out more and saying more. They don't want to sell the land, they want to retain it.
Our land is not for sale at any price.
The stage is set for a fight over claims on land held by non-Indians. The intensity of the fight is heightened by the grim economic picture for farmers on the reservation.
We are faced with the struggle of a declining farming economy, shrinking population. We need each other very much.
If someone has trouble, people just get together and help. It's a good place to live.
Naomi Steinmetz has a leading role in many of the church's activities. Her husband Howard is church president. The church is a focal point of the community where people air their concerns about the land claims. The Steinmetz family knows the land claims situation all too well. They have a 560-acre dairy and grain farm 5 miles east of Bijou with 80 acres of clouded title land they stand to lose.
I'm 46 years old. I've been farming all my life. I've been farming on my own for 30 years. I started as a sophomore in high school farming. I rented land. And I moved into this area here 17 years ago, and I bought this farm.
Their son, Jim, took over Naomi's father's farm nearby. Shortly afterwards, he and his wife, Susan, discovered they too had 40 clouded acres.
When I bought the land, I thought it had clear title on. My grandfather that I bought it from thought it had clear title on. And it's up to the government, really.
The way the farm economy is right now, we can't stand any kind of a setback. Like, I mean, just the slightest thing just sets us back so far. It's just unbelievable. And I don't see how the government can expect us to give up anything. You know, when we
Ironically, Susan is part Indian.
you know, to swindle.
There are very few full-bloods on White Earth today, and all Anishinaabe have adopted aspects of the larger, non-Indian society. But a distinctive Anishinaabe set of values and community that continues to hold them exists on White Earth. The powwow is obvious evidence of the continuing culture. Subtler, more essential signs, like extended family ties, can be seen any day. Many of the Anishinaabe who have left the reservation continue to maintain a distinctive Indian identity in the midst of predominantly non-Indian communities. The link to the land of their home reservation and the opportunity to return and renew their ties is an essential part of that identity. In fact, the majority of White Earth tribal members, over 20,000, 85% of the band, live off reservation, due largely to the loss of land and the lack of jobs on the reservation. Elaine Stately is a member of such a family. Along with her children and grandchildren, she comes back to White Earth as often as she can, especially for the powwow. Elaine was born and raised on the reservation. But when World War II drew her parents away to fight or work in wartime factories, her grandfather could no longer keep up the farm. They had to leave.
White Earth is my home. It always has been and always will be. After I left there, I've always had this feeling that I'm here for economic purposes. I mean, economically, I have to survive. I've done that. I've done it well in the city, but I've always felt like a part of me is here, while another part is longing to go back home. Community Services, this is Elaine.
Elaine has been active in many Twin Cities Indian organizations. She owns her own home in Minneapolis, the gathering place for the family. All of her 7 children have been born away from White Earth. They all have jobs, 3 as owners of their own businesses. 4 have families of their own, yet they all retain their link to White Earth, and they return there whenever they can.
That's where I feel I'm at my strongest, you know, as an Indian person.
There's nothing that can replace the feeling of going home, you know, nothing.
Differences and prejudices between Indians and non-Indians have long been a part of life on White Earth. At the same time, essential community activities like volunteer fire departments, sports, even marriages brought together members of both groups. But the land claims have strained the connections, some to the breaking point, as people have had to choose sides. Pastor Vold lived on the reservation 10 years and saw the changes firsthand.
I noticed that people would go to funeral services for one another, Indian or white, or weddings, or anniversaries, or celebrating events. But when it came to the economic question, who's going to own the land, then there was division a lot of times. I think if we can celebrate together and break bread together, we ought to be able to settle a land issue together.
Pastor Vold hopes for an amicable settlement of the land claims issue. But there is little sign for optimism if you look at the strong ties both sides have to the land. Neither Indian or non-Indian seem willing to compromise, if that compromise means giving up what is most dear to them, what is part of them, the land.
The cause of poverty, the cause of economic deprivation, hardship that we've suffered for 100 years is very basic. It's because of loss of land and exploitation of resources.
Because there are land claims, it's difficult to sell your property. If you're in a situation where you want to sell or mortgage it, it makes it nearly impossible.
Indian people don't think of the land belonging to them. They think about them belonging to the land.
Have you ever driven in the country when the first crop of hay is mowed? Okay, that's the best smell there is.
Both of us are probably victims of a government and victims of what happened long ago.
The current conflict on White Earth has roots much older than the reservation. It goes back hundreds of years to the different ways Indians and Europeans each came to think about the land. Non-Indian settlers who came to White Earth felt much like farmer Norman Danielson.
Well, all the grandparents or great-great-grandparents came from Sweden. And that's in our nature to go out and develop land and tame the wilderness, so to speak. And that's in our blood. So that's all I've ever done all my life.
To immigrants, caring for the land meant transforming it to yield what people wanted, to own it and pass it on for the next generation, to keep it productive.
God is Father to us, and He has given us responsibility to be stewards of the land. So we don't worship the land, but we have high regard and respect.
Anishinabe people, on the other hand, traditionally have viewed themselves as caretakers of the land, as it is, as part of the sacred natural order, rather than bringing an external order to it.
Even a rock, if it's laying there, it was placed there by the natural forces that the Great Spirit caused to happen on this land. We respect that, just that rock. We can't just pick it up and throw it away or kick it away. You just pick it up respectfully and set it off to one side.
Indian and European-based values about the land have been at odds since first contact, and the differences continue. Non-Indian government policymakers in the mid-1800s believed that the best way to cope with Indians was to civilize them, to make their values and behavior like their own. They envisioned White Earth as the ideal place for this grand experiment. Historian Melissa Meyer notes that unlike many areas set aside as Indian reservations because they were considered worthless, White Earth contained valuable land chosen in consultation with Anishinaabe chiefs. The Anishinaabe seemed to be lucky at first. The western part was rolling prairie, specifically picked to encourage Indian farming. The central portion of mixed hardwoods and lakes provided the staples of the traditional Anishinaabe lifestyle: game, fish, wild rice, maple sugar, and birch and basswood bark. The eastern part was thick with valuable stands of white and Norway pine to meet Indian lumber needs and serve as a long-term source of tribal income. This variety of land provided a choice for those Indians who wished to adopt non-Indian ways and farm the land, or maintain the traditional hunting and gathering way of life, or some mixture of the two. That was the vision. It was a vision that did not last long. The 1889 Nelson Act divided Minnesota reservations into sections called allotments. On White Earth, each individual Indian was to receive between 40 and 160 acres. At first, these allotments could not be sold to non-Indians, but laws passed in the early 1900s permitted such sales, opening the reservation to non-Indians. settlers were drawn by the promise of good farmland. The Steinmetzes grew up on farms in the area, and they loved their life on the land. For Howard and his family, farming is not just a job, it is a way of life. Howard Steinmetz has sunk a lot into his farm. Money, years of hard work, his identity. All have gone into the fields he calls his own.
And I just don't think that anybody can come and cloud your land. And we work hard for this equipment to just pay the interest on it. And I'd like to see some of the people that are fighting to get their land back make the investment that we as American farmers have in our investment. When you look at a tractor like this, you're looking at a $120,000 tractor. You know, I don't think there's very many of them out there that have that much invested in their lifetime.
That's where the conflicts come in, I think, is that I feel that this piece of land is not something that can be owned. He feels that owning is very important to him.
While some members of both parties to the dispute respect each other's point of view, they remain unwilling to give in. Political leaders felt the need to come up with a solution. U.S. Congressman Arlen Stanglin represents the area containing White Earth. He repeatedly introduced legislation to deal with the complex land claims issue.
The non-Indian landowner, in almost every instance, bought the land in good faith, believing there was clear title, and improved it. And it may have been improved over 4 and 5 generations. If we were to buy out the non-Indian landowner, in this case, the cost would be horrendous. And those people don't choose to sell.
I feel it's the whole tribes, and it's, you know, the government is taking these, you know, and just cutting it up and slicing it and saying, here's your little piece of pie here.
The heirs and the allottees have no interest in coming back to the reservation, in most cases, to build anything there, and their undivided, their shares in some cases would be so small that really they have, you know, maybe 1/4 of an acre, 1/10 of an acre. What are they going to do with that? There's nothing they can do with that. Far better that they get their just compensation for a wrong that happened years ago.
I don't think Indian people want the money. You know, they want the land. And the land will always be there for them. Money, it comes and it goes. So, it's the generations to come land, too. You know, it's not only ours. And because we're not doing something productive with it, or something that, you know, legislature would like to see more farms, you know, more industry. I don't think it's right that, you know, they should impose on us that we do something with it.
The size of the land claims problem became apparent just at the time that the farm economy plunged, leaving farmers even more vulnerable. Costs rose while land values and crop prices fell. Many farmers like Howard Steinmetz faced imminent foreclosures and loss of the land.
This isn't something that you throw up after having been in it all your life and farming on your own for 30 years. This isn't something that you just throw up and walk away from today and tomorrow.
Ironically, for farmers like Howard, not being able to compete in the larger society or being able to generate the money necessary to keep the land are the same issues Indians faced on the same land generations earlier. Farmers and Indians have their differences, but share a common struggle to stay on the land. Indian leaders want the return of the land for economic development, to generate capital, and to employ Anishinabe now on the reservation and those who would like to return. Indians have faced the economic pressure to leave the reservation for years.
The economic recovery has left many American Indians out in the cold. Almost everyone on the White Earth Reservation remains unemployed.
Depending on whose statistics you use, it's as high as 80% or 90%.
2 months after we talked to Lesta at the powwow, she, her husband Jay, and their children moved to a town off the reservation because Jay was able to get a construction job there.
It is kind of lonesome, you know, because we're used to being out in the woods. We could go anytime, and then we missed racing season, and now duck season, and hunting season's coming up pretty soon, and it gets kind of hectic. I guess we must be just too used to living on the reservation and living, you know, the way we have been. And you don't see any ducks flying around here. I want you to buy this here sweater.
Lesta does volunteer work at the Holy Family Mission store in Crookston. Her sister, Sherry Neeland, comes to visit and shop at the store to make her limited clothing budget stretch further. Sherry still lives on the reservation with her 3 children, supported by AFDC and child support payments from her ex-husband.
I don't think I'd ever want to move back to the city. I'd rather stay here on the reservation. It's a lot better. Even though we don't have as much, it's still better to live. My kids learned a lot. We else take them in the woods with us, and they go pick berries with us, and we get medicine from the woods. You use mostly everything. When you need something, you just go out and get it. The kids know what it is, you know, but if we want some tea or something, just give them a little paper bag and tell them to go get some tea, and, you know, they go run out and get it. You gotta go out and play.
Sherry remembers that life was better for her family when they were living on land her father owned. They supplemented food he hunted or bought with a garden. In 1967, one of Sherry's brothers was badly injured and required long-term hospitalization in Minneapolis. Sherry's father, her mother, Fernette, and the other children followed to keep the family together. After living in the Twin Cities several years, Sherry's father died. The Neelands had enough of the hardships of city life, and the family returned to the reservation. But they found that they could not live on their land anymore.
They took it away. They said, we never heard nothing about it or anything. They never sent us no papers or anything on it. They just said they took it because we owed $350 for, what is it, taxes on the land. And never heard anything about it after that. And so now they sold to some, they used it for snowmobile trail.
Sherry still visits the property where their house once stood. The Neelands were so surprised when their land was taken because they understood that Indian land was not supposed to be taxed. What the family didn't realize was that this piece of land was no longer under government trust protection and therefore was taxable. Sherry's sister Lesta still feels the pain of their loss.
Lost, no home, no place to go back to. Now that I am off the reservation, it feels like I don't even have a home to go to.
On the other side of the picture, Wayne and Marilyn Moline came to White Earth in 1969 after most of the illegal land transfers were completed. Like most people, they didn't know the history of the reservation, and the situation seemed stable. They loved the outdoor life and were looking for a place to buy a resort.
When we bought the place, we didn't realize it was on the reservation. And in fact, checked several sources, including the state of Minnesota, and said, no, it's no longer part of the reservation.
In the next few years, the Malines would come to feel betrayed by government misinformation and learn more than they ever wanted to know about White Earth and our country's Indian policies. The Malines have a claim on only a small area on the edge of their resort, so title to most of their land is clear.
But that doesn't make any difference. As long as some lands are clouded and are allowed to be that way, all lands are clouded, is what it amounts to. And because of other factors, such as the possibility of jurisdiction by the tribe, it makes it an almost impossible situation for people living here.
Until 1977, buyers of reservation property, together with government officials, were either uninformed about history or figured what was done was done. Most Indians felt there was nothing they could do to regain the land. But all that changed in 1977. Suddenly, the tables were turned. The question of who owned the land on White Earth was again open to question. The fight was on.
Everybody, I guess, today talks about the unfortunate innocent that's living on, land that they thought was theirs. What they seem to forget is the fact that what happened to the poor innocent that they took it from originally.
But you can't base all your decisions on something that occurred 100, 200 years ago. It doesn't make sense today.
This has been going on since the inception of this country, and Indian people are right here, right here. You're looking at them. We're here yet. We haven't went away.
There were different policies in place at different times that occurred. We now are the inheritors of that problem.
Today's land battle escalated when Indian George Abed took a stand in the 1977 landmark Zeza court case. Zeza was the Indian name of George's father, Charles Abed. Zeza passed on to George his knowledge of Anishinaabe oral history. He also encouraged George to get an education in the non-Indian system in hopes that George could help his people.
He figured that maybe something could be done about all these broken treaties.
George's chance to act came when he took on the county and state governments in the Zeza case. Clearwater County took his father's land for non-payment of taxes.
So this started from district court in Grand Rapids, Minnesota Supreme Court, all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. So I got it back again.
To understand why George kept on with his court case, we need to look at the history of the Anishinaabe. George remembered the vast amount of land held by the Anishinaabe before they began making treaties with the federal government in 1785. It stretched from Michigan to North Dakota. In treaty after treaty, the Anishinaabe negotiated away section after section until all that remained of their territory were the small areas of land they reserved for themselves and for their future generations.
Understand that we gave up a lot for those plots of land, and if those plots of land were rightfully ours, then we still have the right to own and do what we want with that land.
The Indians' loss of White Earth land itself began 100 years ago, when the land was split up into allotments. Government agents began actually assigning sections of the land in 1902. These allotments did not remain in Indian hands long. Law after law was passed in Washington specifically for White Earth. Beginning in 1902 and culminating in the Clapp Amendment of 1906, Congress removed restrictions on the sale of White Earth land and timber. Within 4 years of the Clapp Amendment, 80% of allottees lost their land. A few mixed bloods got good prices for their property. But newspaper accounts of the time, and the 1912 Graham congressional investigation on White Earth revealed widespread fraud in the allotting process and in the sales of Indian land and timber. Full-blood Indians received an average of only 10% of the land's worth when it passed out of their hands. Lesta and Sherry's uncle, Bill Gagno, still remembers the frauds he and his family experienced.
There was a lot of things that people should have never done. Well, that's just like taking a little umbrella candy away from a little boy or something like that. And the way we lost our land.
I think we grew up with it, knowing that our land was not ours anymore, but yet we still claim it, even though there is a farm there or there is fields of wheat or whatever.
Some parts of the federal government acted to protect Indians' control of their land. Other government entities allowed or actually caused the loss of Indian land. The Justice Department did sue between 1910 and 1920, and again in the 1930s to recover land illegally taken from White Earth Indians. Yet others in the government undermined these efforts. Despite accusations of corruption involving thousands of acres, millions of board feet of timber, and millions of dollars, not a single person was ever tried for criminal fraud. The federal government helped the tribe as a whole regain land by purchases and transfers in the 1930s and 1970s. These brought Indian trust land on White Earth back up to 6% of the reservation. But the federal government allowed state regulation of mixed blood affairs on White Earth and other actions that resulted in the loss of most of the remaining allotments. This loss continued. Until today, only 1/3 of 1% of the allotted lands remain in trust for individual Indians.
Probably because of my history.
After George Abed won the 1977 Zesa case, the Department of the Interior ruled that many types of White Earth land transfers had been illegal. But no one realized how many such cases had happened. In the next several years, government researchers uncovered over 1,000 claims to more than 100,000 acres of White Earth land. Governments and individuals in the past got the land away from Indians illegally, but they sold the land to others. Others now saddled with clouded titles. Years of broken government promises and changing policies were now, in the 1980s, their very real problem.
White Earth people have been compassionate people for 118 years. It's now high time that the people of White Earth get upset with the federal government.
Indians used to live on all this land. So I don't think it'll ever be settled.
There is unrest there on both sides, on the part of the Indian and the non-Indian, and there's got to be resolution. And I maintain the best resolution is in the Congress.
If that land was illegally taken, we want it back. This monetary thing, as far as compensating, Indian people here, is ridiculous.
I think if there's going to be a fight, it should be between the government and the Indians, not us and the Indians.
In 1980, 250 farmers and other landholders on White Earth got a shock. They received letters telling them they did not have clear title to their land, and the government might sue them to get it back for Indians.
The court in Zesa says we do have a continuation of the trust, and we continue to hold title to these lands in trust.
Practically speaking, this meant the government claimed it still owned the land in trust for Indians because these allotments had been taken away from them illegally. And so the government was responsible for getting it back. The non-Indian landholders who received direct notification from the federal government of the clouds on their land were the exception.
The majority of the landowners have not been notified, that's correct. Also, it's fair to say that the majority of the heirs of the allottees have not been notified, primarily because the Bureau does not know who those people are for the vast majority of the cases.
Most non-Indian landholders had to find out if they had clouded titles through their own research, calling county attorneys, or by attending meetings of the Equal Rights Association, or the UTA, the United Township Association. These groups lobbied for the rights of non-tribal member landholders on White Earth.
We've had several area-wide meetings where we've had maps showing where the claims are. I would think probably most people don't realize that today that they have claims.
Many farmers only discovered they had claims against their land when lending institutions turned down their request for loans because their land titles were clouded, hurting them when they needed money most. Howard Steinmetz was one of those farmers.
In just the last 3 years is when I got a notice that I have an 80 that's clouded on my farm. And I got my notice from Federal Land Bank that they'll give me clear title on it. They don't want nothing to do with it. I guess it's getting pretty questionable now with FHA whether they're going to do anything with it either.
As landholders like the Steinmetzes became aware of their claims and the implications, they pressured their elected representatives to do something to relieve the problem. Government officials searched for a solution that would not displace any private property holders and would leave the extensive government land holdings on White Earth substantially intact. Indian and non-Indian leaders agreed that a negotiated settlement of the claims issue would be better than lawsuits. But they disagreed drastically over what form a settlement should take.
What we want is that land.
During 1982, Congressman Arlen Stangland and Senator David Durenberger introduced legislation in Congress. The bills would clear all titles on White Earth by paying money to the allottees and their heirs for land illegally taken.
What we hope is to make a grant of a certain amount of economic development monies that the band can use to create industry, to create jobs.
Both the Tribal Council and Anishinabe Akeeng members suggested alternatives. Their proposals would satisfy Indian desire for regaining their land base, while not ruining people holding clouded land.
You know, we're not saying kick these people off the land. We're not saying that. And see, that's what people have in their mind. That's what we're up to here. It is not. We've been both wrong.
We're talking about a lifetime lease for these current property holders, so their lives won't be disrupted such as our lives were disrupted.
In 1984, a bill was introduced in the Minnesota legislature.
The state and federal governments came up with a plan this year to give back 10,000 acres of state-owned land, plus a compensation package of $17 million in federal money. But the tribal government and some land heirs say the proposed settlement is not enough. A coalition of heirs to the land is calling on Governor Perpich to veto the proposal settled on in the legislature. Tribal elders say the state must stop trying to steal the land. And younger leaders in this group say a compromise would only be giving away what is rightfully theirs.
The White Earth Reservation simply is not for sale. None of us feel that it is reasonable that we clear all land titles inside the reservation at the expense of our own people.
While some Anishinaabe protested, others did not agree with Anishinabe Akeeng that past wrongs must be righted.
It's hard when you say that, you know, 10 generations down the line, you're entitled to something that your ancestors way back then had, because times have changed and there are so many people to distribute it among that by the time they pay the lawyer fees and everything, they aren't going to get anything worth all this stink anyway, I don't think.
people on all sides of the issue feel more is at stake than just the clouded lands. United Township members fear that if the tribe gets more money and land, it will try to increase its powers and tax or pass ordinances applying to non-tribal members living on the reservation.
The biggest question is definitely jurisdiction. It's probably the biggest cause of why our organization has been fighting the particular Senate and House bills on the land claims.
If we sell our land and stuff, then by the time we're old, our kids will be grown up and they won't have nothing. No land, no hunting or fishing rights, no, wild rice rights. They won't have any kind of rights.
The Claims Settlement Bill nearly passed at the close of the 1984 congressional session, despite tribal opposition. So the White Earth Tribal Council entered into negotiations with county, state, and federal government officials.
We knew when we went in there that our backs were against the wall in this situation, mainly because if we hadn't come up with something that they would accept, they would have got something through, in the 85 session that we wouldn't have approved of.
Given the tight federal budget, Congress and the administration were not sympathetic to any proposals that would cost much money.
There is still some concern with the Office of Management and Budget as to what the White Earth Land Claims answer might set as a pattern for other land claims settlement throughout the United States, some of which would be substantially larger in the total dollars package than this land claim settlement.
The government dictated the maximum amount the settlement could cost, leaving the tribal council and representatives for landholders with little room to bargain. Lesta Weiss and Sherry Neeland, who had never been politically active, were angered when they heard on TV that the tribal council had agreed to a compromise plan to give up land claims in exchange for monetary compensation. Lesta and Sherry got together 15 other friends and relations and started walking the 40 miles from their homes to the tribal headquarters in White Earth Village in protest.
And by the time we got to White Earth here, there was over 100 people involved. The original people around here that live around here, they just want them to know that we're here and we're gonna keep on fighting.
This spontaneous demonstration by unaffiliated local people was followed by protest organized by Anishinabe Akeeng. Finally, they met with the tribal council on May 13, 1985.
They came by the hundreds to the White Earth Indian Reservation to get across one big message.
Our land is not for sale at any price.
The Indians argued that they were entitled to 200,000 acres of land on the reservation, now primarily occupied by private citizens. They made it clear that a federal government proposal to settle for $20 million and 10,000 acres is unacceptable.
When the United States Congress tells us that this is one way or the other, you either get this or you get nothing. Well, let's take nothing rather than sell our lands.
So the Indians asked members of the White Earth Tribal Council to rescind their support for the government's proposed settlement. At first, the council members declined.
I still believe there has to be a bill in there to protect the people, not only that are here, but all over this place. What about the rest of the people? Selling them out!
But after constant pressure, the council members felt they had no choice but to give in.
I will move, Mr. Chairman, that we rescind our bill. But I also want to for one day. I believe it could be a mistake.
The breakdown in the reported agreement among the tribe, local, state, and federal governments left farmers like Howard Steinmetz feeling angry and frustrated. Just how much longer would the claims continue to burden them?
We're sitting here with our hands folded hoping that something happens, but I don't think that everybody should be able to go and just do the bargaining on my farm because I'm still the owner of it. I mean, how much of it are they going to get?
Howard was not alone. Indian and non-Indian people on the reservation felt ignored and left out of the process of resolving the land claims issue.
I'm sure the federal government's going to think of me out here as just another dirt farmer. We can do what they think with them. I mean, that's the way we feel about the way they're handling us now with our prices and everything else, and I'm sure they're going to handle this the same way.
Congressman Stangeland and other officials point out that hearings were conducted twice in Washington. Numerous meetings occurred among county, state, federal, and tribal government representatives, but always off the reservation.
The only way that they're going to get facts and to get a good understanding is to come out and talk to the general populace, because they can't afford to go to Washington, D.C. to talk. And it doesn't matter whether it's an Indian heir or a farmer.
To date, only one informal public hearing has been held on the reservation by a government official. The drive to settle the issue continued in Washington. In each of 4 years, claims settlement bills were introduced in Congress. Revised versions of the federal and state bills finally passed. They were signed into law by President Reagan and Governor Perpich in March 1986. The legislation fell short of the hopes of many on both sides of the conflict. It did not return most of the claim land to Indians, and it did not conclusively or immediately clear all landholders' titles. The law gives allottees and heirs 180 days to file suit for recovery of the land or for more monetary compensation. Heirs that do bring suit are barred from receiving any settlement money. Identifying and contacting the heirs will take anywhere from 2 to 20 years.
Unless you can locate the heir, how can you put a statute of limitations on it, see? And if your statute of limitations runs before you even identify whom has that right, then I think you got a constitutional question.
Because many Anishinaabe heirs have little money, the choice between taking compensation or risking an expensive court battle for the land is painful.
Do I take the $150 now and, give my children something, feed my children for a month? How do you explain taking the $150 now and telling your children 20 years down, we don't have that land anymore?
On the other hand, landholders like the Steinmetzes and Malines are upset that a bill which was supposed to clear their titles left them open to suits for over a year and, by making the deadline, actually encouraged suits within that time.
If a bill is going to be passed to clear land titles, it should clear the land titles immediately, not sometime down the future whenever the various governments decide they're going to do it.
Many of the farmers, like the Steinmetzes, may well lose their farms for other economic reasons before a resolution comes. If and when the titles are finally cleared, it will benefit whoever holds the land then. But those owners may not be the Neelands' children or the Steinmetzes' children. The state, county, and federal governments will continue to hold 190,000 acres of reservation land.
We have got to always remember that we have human beings involved today that need to have the answers solved so that they can live together cooperatively tomorrow. Otherwise, we're just going to compound emotional interests that may very well come in strong conflict, and I don't think that's the way to answer the problem.
The peace lawmakers hoped their compromise would bring has not materialized. Soon after the law passed, a suit was indeed filed by Indian heirs against landholders for the return of land and against the state and federal governments for disregard of their legal responsibilities. Another suit was filed challenging the constitutionality of the law. Banks continued to avoid making loans secured by lands with clouded titles until the suits and the constitutionality of the law are decided by the courts. Ironically, the economic paralysis and legal conflict the law was intended to avoid have been perpetuated. The White Earth land claims remain unsettled. No final resolution is in sight for years to come. The people of this clouded land face a clouded future, a future filled with questions yet unanswered.
If these politicians can extinguish our title to these lands and literally validate crime and reward the people that are currently holding our property illegally and further punish the victims, that if they can do it to us, then whose property is safe in this country?
How do I know when I get this settlement, if they settle on this one here, that 6 months later they don't come and cloud off my building site?
If we lost this land, well, I suppose it would be something like a man without a country.
If things don't change, I don't look for us probably to even have this farm in a year. So I don't know what our kids will be doing down the road.
When does it end? When do we have something to call our own that our children can go back to? You know, that we can go back to when we need to rejuvenate ourselves.
The issues are going to become bigger than, you know, in whose name and title is it. It's going to be more an issue of whether or not any of us live on the land.